quiet girl's shocking response when bully destroys her lunch. What happens next will inspire you. An inspiring story by Heartfelt Tales. The cafeteria fell silent as Maya's lunch tray crashed to the floor, her carefully prepared meal scattering across the dirty tiles like broken dreams. The metallic clang echoed through the room as every eye turned toward the corner table where she sat frozen, her hands trembling not from fear, but from something far more dangerous, years of suppressed rage finally reaching its breaking point. If you're enjoying this story of courage and transformation, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think will happen next. Don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more inspiring stories like this one. Maya Chen had always been the quiet girl who ate alone, the one who minded her own business and never caused trouble. At 17, she had perfected the art of invisibility, slipping through the halls of Riverside High like a shadow. Her thick-rimmed glasses, oversized sweaters, and habit of keeping her head down had made her the perfect target for those who fed on others' vulnerability. But today was different. Today, something inside her had shifted like tectonic plates preparing for an earthquake. It started that morning when she found her grandmother's letter, the one that had been lost for 3 years in a box of old belongings. Her 9 eyes elegant Chinese characters flowed across the rice paper, telling the story of her own struggles as a young woman in a foreign country, how she had learned to find strength in the face of cruelty, how she had refused to let others define her worth. My precious granddaughter, the letter read, there will come a day when you must choose between remaining small to make others comfortable, or standing tall to honor the warrior spirit within you. Choose courage, my dear one. Choose yourself. Maya had clutched that letter to her chest during the bus ride to school, feeling her grandmother's wisdom seep into her bones like medicine. She didn't know then that she would need every word of that wisdom before the day was through. The trouble started, as it always did, with Derek Morrison and his pack of followers. Derek was the kind of bully who wore his cruelty like a designer jacket, expensive, attention-grabbing, and meant to impress those who didn't look too closely at the person underneath. He was 17 but carried himself like he owned the world, his Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders that he used to intimidate anyone smaller than himself. For 3 years, Derek had made Maya's life miserable with calculated precision. He knocked books from her hands in the hallway, accidentally bumped into her at her locker, and whispered cruel comments about her appearance just loud enough for others to hear. He had turned her existence into a daily navigation of landmines, each interaction designed to remind her that she was powerless, invisible, unworthy of basic respect. But today, when Maya walked into the cafeteria carrying her carefully prepared lunch, homemade dumplings her mother had woken up early to make, jasmine rice that reminded her of home, vegetables cut with the precision that came from love, she felt different. The letter in her pocket seemed to pulse with her grandmother's strength, and for the first time in years, she didn't automatically scan the room for escape routes. She chose a table by the window, where sunlight painted golden squares on the worn linoleum. She unwrapped her lunch with unusual care, savoring the aroma that rose from the containers like a hug from her family. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine eating in peace, maybe even enjoying her meal instead of swallowing it quickly before someone could ruin it. That's when Derek's shadow fell across her table. Well, what do we have here? His voice carried that particular tone that made Maya's stomach clench, the sound of a predator who had found isolated prey. Looks like the freak brought her weird foreign food again. Maya kept her eyes on her lunch, her grandmother's letter burning in her pocket like a talisman. It's just food, Derek. Please leave me alone. Just food? Derek's voice rose loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. This stuff smells like something died. How can you eat garbage like that? His friends gathered behind him, forming a semicircle that blocked her exit. Maya recognized the setup. She had been trapped like this before, forced to endure whatever humiliation Derek had planned while a crowd gathered to watch her squirm. You know what? Derek reached across the table, his fingers hovering over her carefully arranged meal. I think you're contaminating the air in here with your nasty food. Maybe you should eat somewhere more appropriate. Before Maya could react, Derek's hand swept across her tray, sending containers flying. Dumplings rolled across the floor like scattered pearls, rice spread in a white carpet, vegetables mixed with dirt and debris. The crash seemed to echo forever, punctuated by the gasps and whispers of students who had stopped their own meals to watch the spectacle. "There," Derek said with satisfaction, his hands on his hips as he surveyed the destruction. "Now eat from down there, where you belong. Maybe crawling around on the floor will teach you to bring normal food like everyone else." The cafeteria had gone completely silent. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, waiting to see how the quiet girl would react to this latest humiliation. Some faces showed sympathy, others cruel amusement, but most just displayed the blank curiosity of spectators at an accident. For 3 years, Maya had endured moments like this. 3 years of cleaning up messes she hadn't made, of apologizing for existing, of shrinking herself smaller and smaller until she almost disappeared entirely. 3 years of letting Derek and others like him define her worth, dictate her actions, control her life through fear and shame. But as she stared at her grandmother's dumplings scattered across the dirty floor, dumplings made with love and tradition and the kind of care that couldn't be bought or faked, something inside Maya snapped. Not broke, but snapped into place, like a puzzle piece finally finding where it belonged. She thought of her grandmother, arriving in America with nothing but courage and determination, facing discrimination and hardship but never letting anyone make her ashamed of who she was. She thought of her mother, waking up at dawn to prepare a lunch that would nourish both body and spirit, putting love into every fold of dumpling wrapper. She thought of all the quiet girls like herself, sitting in cafeterias around the world, being taught that their silence was the price of peace. Maya stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor with deliberate precision. She reached across the table where Derek still stood smirking, expecting her to drop to her knees and clean up his mess like she had so many times before. Instead, her fingers closed around the metal spoon from her fallen tray. "No," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "I won't eat from the floor. And I won't let you treat me like garbage anymore." Derek's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "What did you say, freak? I don't think I heard you right." "You heard me perfectly." Maya's voice grew stronger with each word, fed by years of suppressed anger and her grandmother's warrior spirit. "I said no. I'm done being your victim." Derek stepped closer, using his height to intimidate her the way he had so many times before. "You think you're tough now? You think saying no changes anything? You're still the same pathetic loser you've always been." He reached out to shove her backward, the same casual violence he had used to control her for years. But this time, Maya was ready. This time, she chose courage over fear, action over submission, herself over his comfort. The spoon moved in her hand like it had a will of its own, catching Derek's reaching arm with a sharp edge. It wasn't meant to seriously injure. Maya wasn't a violent person, and she never wanted to truly hurt anyone. But it was meant to stop him, to create a barrier between his aggression and her body, to show him and everyone watching that she would no longer be an easy target. Derek jerked backward with a sharp cry of pain, clutching his arm where a thin line of blood had appeared. The cut wasn't deep, but it was shocking enough to break the spell of his perceived invincibility, shocking enough to show everyone in that cafeteria that bullies were just people, capable of being hurt and surprised and stopped. "You psycho!" Derek shouted, staring at the blood on his arm like he couldn't believe it was real. "You actually cut me!" Maya stood her ground, the spoon still in her hand but hanging loose at her side. She wasn't aggressive or threatening, she was simply present in a way she had never been before, taking up the space she deserved to occupy. "I defended myself," she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent cafeteria. "You destroyed my property, tried to humiliate me, and then attempted to put your hands on me. I had every right to protect myself." For a moment, Derek looked like he might charge at her, might escalate this into something even more serious. But something in Maya's posture, in the way she stood with quiet confidence instead of cowering, seemed to drain the fight out of him. He looked around the cafeteria, perhaps expecting support from his friends or the watching crowd, but found only shocked faces and uncomfortable silence. Mrs. Patterson, the cafeteria supervisor, finally broke through the crowd that had gathered. She surveyed the scene, the scattered food, Derek's bleeding arm, Maya standing calm and straight-backed with the spoon in her hand, and her expression suggested she had seen enough of these confrontations to understand exactly what had happened. "Derek, go to the nurse and get that looked at," she said firmly. "Then report to the principal's office. Maya, you too. We need to sort this out properly." As Derek stalked away, still clutching his arm and muttering threats, Maya bent down and began collecting the remains of her lunch. To her surprise, several other students joined her, picking up scattered dumplings and wiping rice from the floor without being asked. A girl from her chemistry class handed her a napkin. A boy she barely knew helped gather the empty containers. "That was brave," whispered Sarah Kim, a Korean girl who often ate alone at a nearby table. "I wish I had that kind of courage." Maya looked up at her, seeing her own struggles reflected in Sarah's eyes. "You do," she said quietly. "We all do. Sometimes we just need to remember it's there." The walk to the principal's office felt different than Maya had expected. She wasn't triumphant or aggressive, she felt calm, centered in a way that was entirely new to her. Her grandmother's letter rustled in her pocket with each step, reminding her that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. Principal Rodriguez listened to both sides of the story with the kind of patience that suggested he had dealt with similar situations many times before. Derek, his arm bandaged and his swagger somewhat diminished, told a version of events that painted himself as the victim of an unprovoked attack by a dangerous student. Maya told the truth. She spoke about 3 years of harassment, about Derek's pattern of destroying her property and dignity, about her right to defend herself when threatened with physical violence. She was calm and factual, neither minimizing Derek's injury nor apologizing for protecting herself. "Maya," Principal Rodriguez said finally, "while I understand you felt threatened, using an object as a weapon is serious. However, given Derek's documented history of harassment and your clean record, I'm going to suspend you for 3 days and recommend counseling to help you develop better conflict resolution skills." Maya nodded, accepting the consequence without argument. "Derek," the principal continued, turning to the boy who had seemed so confident just hours before, "you're suspended for a week, and this is your final warning. If there are any more incidents of harassment or bullying, you'll be expelled. You'll also need to write a formal apology to Maya and complete community service hours." Derek started to protest, but Principal Rodriguez held up a hand. "Son, you've been given more second chances than you deserved. This ends now, one way or another." Over the next few days, word of the cafeteria incident spread through Riverside High like wildfire, but not in the way Maya had expected. Instead of being labeled as violent or dangerous, she found herself surrounded by other students who had their own stories of being bullied, who saw her action as inspiration rather than aggression. Sarah Kim started sitting with her at lunch when she returned from suspension. Then Marcus, a quiet boy from her English class, joined them. Soon their table became a gathering place for kids who had always eaten alone, who had been made to feel invisible or worthless by those who mistook cruelty for strength. Maya learned that her moment of courage had created ripples she never could have imagined. 3 other students reported Derek's harassment to administrators, providing the evidence needed to finally address his behavior seriously. A school-wide anti-bullying program was implemented, with Maya asked to share her story as part of the presentation. Most importantly, Maya discovered that standing up for herself hadn't turned her into someone she didn't recognize. She was still quiet, still thoughtful, still preferred books to parties. But now she was quiet by choice rather than fear, thoughtful in a way that included consideration of her own worth, preferring books to parties because she genuinely enjoyed reading, not because she was afraid of social interaction. The letter from her grandmother found a permanent place in Maya's wallet, but she no longer needed to touch it for strength. The wisdom it contained had taken root inside her, growing into something that belonged entirely to her. Derek, meanwhile, seemed to shrink as his victims found their voices. Without the power that came from others' silence, he became just another student struggling with his own insecurities. Maya heard through the grapevine that he had started seeing the school counselor, working through whatever pain had driven him to inflict pain on others. Maya never celebrated Derek's downfall or gloated over his struggles. She had learned that real strength wasn't about defeating enemies, but about refusing to let others define your worth. It wasn't about becoming someone else, it was about becoming fully yourself, without apology or compromise. Months later, as Maya walked across the stage at graduation, she thought about that moment in the cafeteria when everything changed. Not because she had used a spoon to defend herself, that was just 1 second in a much larger transformation. Everything changed because she had finally chosen to see herself as someone worth defending, someone deserving of respect, someone with the right to take up space in the world. In her valedictorian speech, Maya talked about the difference between violence and self-defense, between aggression and assertiveness, between being a victim and being vulnerable. She spoke about her grandmother's courage, her mother's love, and the importance of creating spaces where everyone could eat their lunch in peace, regardless of what that lunch looked like or where it came from. The strongest thing you can do, she concluded, looking out at a gymnasium full of classmates who had learned to see her as more than the quiet girl in the corner, is refuse to let someone else's insecurity become your prison. Stand up for yourself not because you want to hurt others, but because you deserve to live without fear. Choose courage, choose yourself, and choose to make the world a little bit safer for the next person who needs to find their voice. The applause that followed wasn't just for her academic achievements, but for the girl who had learned to transform a moment of crisis into a lifetime of courage, who had shown an entire school that the quietest people often have the most powerful voices, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with fists or weapons, but with the simple, revolutionary act of refusing to accept less than you deserve. As Maya walked off that stage, her grandmother's spirit walking beside her, she carried with her the knowledge that she had not only survived her challenges but had used them to become someone stronger, kinder, and more authentically herself. The scared girl who once ate alone had become a young woman who chose her solitude consciously, who valued her own company as much as she valued the community she had helped create for others who needed a safe place to belong. That, she realized, was what real victory looked like, not defeating your enemies, but discovering that you were never as powerless as you thought, and using that discovery to lift up others who were still learning to find their own strength. Thank you for watching this story of courage and transformation. Maya's journey reminds us that we all have the power to change our circumstances when we find the strength to stand up for ourselves. If this story inspired you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. What moment in your life required you to find courage you didn't know you had? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales and hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary courage found in ordinary people. Until next time, remember that you are stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more worthy of respect than anyone has the right to make you believe otherwise. Stay strong, stay kind, and keep sharing your light with the world.